Welcome back, everyone. If you appreciate clear analysis without the noise, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Today, we're going to discuss something that many people have overlooked, even though it may be one of the most important developments we've seen in years. For a long time, people following Iraq's economic story have focused on one question: when will it happen? When will the exchange rate change? When will the big announcement come? When will the world finally recognize Iraq's true economic value? But what if we've been asking the wrong question? What if the real story isn't about a single announcement at all? Because the evidence emerging right now suggests that Iraq is not preparing for one dramatic event. Instead, it is moving through a carefully coordinated transformation involving banking, technology, trade, government reform, and international cooperation. And that distinction matters. History shows us that major economic transitions rarely happen overnight. They happen when multiple systems begin moving together toward the same destination. That is exactly what appears to be happening in Iraq today. For years, progress seemed fragmented. The banking sector would improve. Then political instability would slow everything down. Trade would expand. Then governance challenges would create new obstacles. One step forward, one step backward. The cycle repeated itself again and again. But recently, something has changed. For the first time in years, multiple parts of Iraq's economy appear to be moving in the same direction simultaneously: banking reform, digital transformation, political coordination, international financial integration, infrastructure development, trade expansion, revenue diversification. Instead of competing with each other, these systems are beginning to reinforce each other. And that is why many analysts are paying closer attention than ever before. Let's begin with the political environment, because every major economic reform depends on political stability. For years, one of Iraq's biggest challenges wasn't a lack of resources. It wasn't a lack of international support. It wasn't even a lack of technical expertise. The real challenge was governance. Economic institutions could only move as fast as the political environment allowed. When governments were divided, reforms slowed. When competing interests interfered with institutions, transparency suffered. When political disputes dominated headlines, investor confidence weakened. That environment appears to be improving. Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani has repeatedly emphasized economic modernization and institutional reform. More importantly, government agencies appear increasingly aligned around shared economic objectives. This matters because economic transformation requires coordination. A central bank cannot operate effectively if government ministries are pulling in different directions. Trade reforms cannot succeed without administrative cooperation. Financial modernization cannot happen if institutions are constantly fighting internal battles. The stronger the coordination becomes, the more effective reform becomes. And that's exactly what many observers believe we're witnessing right now. Another important development involves cooperation between Baghdad and the Kurdistan regional government. Historically, disagreements over oil revenue, customs procedures, and budget allocations created uncertainty. Investors dislike uncertainty. Financial institutions dislike uncertainty. Markets dislike uncertainty. When major economic actors operate under different systems, confidence suffers. Recent discussions aimed at customs, coordination, and fiscal cooperation suggest that both sides understand the importance of presenting a more unified economic framework. That may sound technical, but in reality, it is extremely important. A modern economy requires clear and transparent revenue systems. The more unified those systems become, the more confidence international partners have in Iraq's future. And confidence is one of the most valuable assets any economy can possess. Now, here's where things become even more interesting. Because political stability alone doesn't create economic transformation. It simply creates the conditions for transformation. The real engine behind everything happening right now may be Iraq's financial system. And that's exactly what we're going to discuss in Part 2. Because the banking reforms currently underway could be among the most significant developments Iraq has seen in decades. The banking system that could change everything. Welcome back. In Part 1, we discussed the political and institutional foundation that is making Iraq's economic transformation possible. Now let's move into the area that many analysts believe sits at the center of the entire process, the banking system. Because regardless of what anyone believes about future exchange rates, one fact remains true. No modern economy can operate at a global level without a modern banking system. And for years, this was one of Iraq's biggest challenges. The country possessed enormous natural resources. It had strategic geographic importance. It had international support. But its banking infrastructure lagged behind what a globally integrated economy requires. That is exactly why the reforms taking place today deserve so much attention. Let's think about this logically. Imagine trying to run a modern international business using banking systems designed decades ago. International transactions become difficult. Compliance becomes difficult. Investment becomes difficult. Trade becomes difficult. Everything slows down. That's why Iraq's banking modernization effort is so important. This isn't simply about opening more bank branches. It isn't about issuing more debit cards. It is about building the financial infrastructure necessary for Iraq to connect fully with the international economy. And when we examine the evidence carefully, we can see that this process is much further along than many people realize. One of the most significant developments involves international banking compliance. For years, Iraq's major state-owned banks have been working to meet international standards. Why does this matter? Because international financial institutions operate according to strict rules. Banks must demonstrate transparency. They must meet auditing requirements. They must satisfy compliance standards. They must show that transactions can be monitored and verified. Without those safeguards, global financial integration becomes nearly impossible. Recent reports suggest that several major Iraqi banks have made substantial progress toward those standards. This may sound technical, but its importance cannot be overstated. Think of international banking as a global network. Before joining that network, every participant must prove they can follow the same rules. What Iraq is doing right now is proving exactly that. And every step toward compliance increases confidence from international partners. Confidence attracts investment. Investment creates growth. Growth strengthens economic fundamentals. The process becomes self-reinforcing. Another major development involves digital banking. For years, Iraq operated primarily as a cash-based economy. Large amounts of money circulated outside the formal banking system. While cash has advantages, it also creates challenges. Cash transactions are harder to track. They are harder to audit. They create opportunities for inefficiency, and they limit the government's ability to understand economic activity. That is why Iraq has been aggressively promoting digital payments, bank cards, electronic transfers, mobile banking, digital wallets, electronic payment systems. These aren't isolated projects. They are pieces of a larger strategy, a strategy designed to move economic activity into transparent and traceable channels. The more money flows through formal systems, the easier it becomes to manage monetary policy effectively. The easier it becomes to combat corruption. The easier it becomes to attract international investment. And perhaps most importantly, the easier it becomes to support a modern financial system. Let's talk about something else that deserves attention: financial inclusion. For many years, large portions of Iraq's population remained outside the formal banking sector. Millions of people relied primarily on cash. Many had never opened a bank account. Many had limited access to financial services. That is changing. Government initiatives and banking reforms have encouraged citizens to open accounts. Electronic payment cards are becoming more common. Digital banking services are expanding. Financial education campaigns are increasing awareness. This matters because a stronger banking system requires participation. A modern economy functions more efficiently when citizens actively use financial institutions. The Central Bank of Iraq understands this. That is why financial inclusion has become such a major priority. Now let's discuss the digital dinar concept that has generated so much discussion. There is often confusion around this topic. Some people imagine a digital dinar as a completely separate currency. Others believe it represents some type of cryptocurrency. Neither explanation is fully accurate. At its core, the digital dinar represents modernization. It represents the transition toward a more efficient financial infrastructure, a system capable of handling transactions faster, more securely, and with greater transparency. Whether people realize it or not, much of the developed world already operates through digital money. Most transactions occur electronically. Most transfers occur electronically. Most financial activity exists digitally. Iraq is moving in that direction as well, and that movement is essential for long-term economic development. The significance of this cannot be ignored, because before any major monetary reform can succeed, the infrastructure supporting that reform must already exist. You cannot build the house after people move in. You build the foundation first, then the walls, then the roof. Only after the structure is complete can people begin using it. What we're seeing today resembles that process. The foundation is being strengthened. The framework is being assembled. The systems are being connected, and the pace of progress appears to be accelerating. Another factor worth discussing is international cooperation. Major financial reforms do not occur in isolation. Central banks communicate with each other. Governments communicate with each other. Financial institutions share expertise. Consulting firms provide technical assistance. Audit firms verify compliance. This international cooperation helps ensure that reforms meet globally accepted standards, and every successful step strengthens Iraq's credibility. Credibility is a powerful economic asset. It influences investment decisions. It influences lending decisions. It influences lending decisions. It influences market confidence. When credibility increases, opportunities increase. When opportunities increase, economic growth becomes easier to sustain. Now here's the key takeaway from everything we've discussed so far. The banking reforms underway are not random. They are not isolated. They are connected pieces of a larger transformation, a transformation designed to modernize Iraq's financial system, a transformation designed to improve transparency, a transformation designed to increase international integration, a transformation designed to increase international integration. The question is no longer whether Iraq is reforming its banking sector. The evidence clearly shows that it is. The real question is how these banking reforms connect to Iraq's broader economic future. And that's exactly what we'll explore in Part 3. Because once we move beyond banking and begin examining trade, infrastructure, and economic diversification, the bigger picture becomes even more interesting. The economic engine behind Iraq's future. In Part 1, we explored the political foundation that is creating stability for reform. In Part 2, we examined the banking system and digital infrastructure being built to support Iraq's future. Now we arrive at the third piece of the puzzle, the real economy. Because no currency becomes stronger simply because a government wants it to. No nation becomes wealthy simply because it announces a plan. Real economic strength comes from production, trade, investment, infrastructure, and growth. And this is where Iraq's story becomes especially interesting. For decades, Iraq's economy has been known for one thing above all else: oil. Massive oil reserves, massive oil exports, massive dependence on energy revenues. In fact, for many years, oil accounted for the overwhelming majority of government income. While that generated wealth, it also created vulnerability. Because when oil prices rise, revenues increase. When oil prices fall, revenues decline. An economy dependent on one resource can become trapped in a cycle of uncertainty. That's why economists around the world pay close attention to something called non-oil revenue. And right now, Iraq's non-oil economy is showing signs of real growth. This may be one of the most important developments taking place today. When customs revenues rise, when tax collections increase, when commercial activity expands, when manufacturing begins contributing more to national income, those are signs that an economy is becoming more diversified. A diversified economy is a stronger economy. A stronger economy supports a stronger currency, and a stronger currency creates more opportunities for investment and growth. Everything is connected. Now let's talk about trade, because trade is where geography becomes economic power, and Iraq sits in one of the most strategically important locations on Earth. Look at a map. Iraq connects the Gulf region to Turkey. It connects Asia to Europe. It sits directly along some of the most important commercial routes in the world. For years, conflict prevented Iraq from fully utilizing that position. But today, the country is actively working to transform geography into economic advantage. One example is the Development Road Project. Many people have heard the name. Few understand its significance. This project aims to connect southern Iraq to Turkey through a modern transportation corridor. Highways, railways, logistics hubs, commercial infrastructure, all working together to create a trade route connecting the Gulf to Europe. Think about what that means. Instead of being simply an oil exporter, Iraq becomes a transportation hub. Goods moving between continents pass through Iraqi territory. Trade generates fees. Fees generate revenue. Revenue supports economic growth. Economic growth supports financial stability. This is how nations build long-term prosperity. And the Development Road Project is only one part of that strategy. Ports are also expanding. Commercial traffic continues moving through Iraqi facilities. New logistics agreements are creating additional opportunities. Cross-border trade routes are becoming more active. Every new shipment, every new commercial agreement, every new transportation link adds another layer to Iraq's economic foundation. Now let's discuss foreign investment, because this is where confidence becomes visible. Investors don't commit billions of dollars based on speeches. They commit capital based on expectations. They study political stability. They study banking reforms. They study legal systems. They study infrastructure. And then they decide whether the risk is worth taking. What we're seeing today is increasing international interest in Iraq's future. Not because Iraq is perfect. It isn't. Every developing economy faces challenges. But because investors can see progress, they can see reforms, they can see modernization, they can see opportunity, and opportunity attracts capital. One area receiving particular attention is energy development. Most people focus exclusively on oil. But Iraq's energy future extends far beyond crude exports. Natural gas represents a major opportunity. For years, Iraq has flared large quantities of natural gas. Gas that could have been captured. Gas that could have been captured. Gas that could have been processed. Now plans are underway to significantly reduce that waste. Why is that important? Because every additional energy resource developed creates additional economic value. Additional value means additional revenue. Additional revenue means greater economic resilience. And greater resilience supports long-term financial stability. Let's also talk about infrastructure. Because infrastructure is often invisible until it isn't there. Roads, bridges, ports, railways, power systems, communications networks. These are the foundations upon which economies operate. Without them, growth becomes difficult. With them, growth becomes possible. Across Iraq, infrastructure projects continue moving forward. Some are large, some are small, but together they create something important: momentum. And momentum matters, because economic development rarely happens through one giant breakthrough. It happens through hundreds of smaller improvements accumulating over time. A road here, a port upgrade there, a logistics center, a power project, a new industrial facility. Each project contributes something. Eventually, those contributions become visible at a national level. This is exactly how successful economies develop. Today, economic cooperation is becoming increasingly important. Trade agreements, energy partnerships, transportation initiatives, investment discussions. Regional governments are beginning to view Iraq not simply as a security issue, but as an economic opportunity. That shift is significant because stronger regional relationships create stronger commercial relationships, and stronger commercial relationships support economic growth. The more connected Iraq becomes to regional markets, the greater its economic potential becomes. Now I want to bring all of this together because we've discussed multiple topics: trade, infrastructure, investment, energy, diversification, regional integration. At first glance, they may seem separate, but they're not. They're all pieces of the same story. A story about economic transformation. A story about building a broader and more sustainable economy. A story about moving beyond dependence on a single resource. And most importantly, a story about creating the conditions necessary for long-term prosperity. That doesn't happen overnight. It never does. But when you examine the evidence objectively, you can see the direction. The foundations are being strengthened. The infrastructure is expanding. The economy is diversifying. The opportunities are growing. And that brings us to perhaps the most important question of all. How does all of this connect to Iraq's position within the global financial system? Because economic growth alone isn't enough. The world must also recognize that growth. International institutions must engage with it. Global markets must trust it. And that's exactly what we're going to discuss in Part 4. Because the international dimension of Iraq's transformation may be the most revealing piece of the entire puzzle. Part 4 Manhum International Banking Integration, IMF, US Treasury, Federal Reserve, Global Financial System और Iraq की Global Readiness को cover करेंगे.